USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, December 18th, 2023. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th, 2024 at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. Well, guys, we're at the midpoint of the season, and that means first half in review. Not season in review, but half season in review. And we're going to start out at the top here with BU. They head into the break tops in the PairWise Rankings. In fact, 3 Hockey East teams in the top 4, BU, BC, and Maine. But BU, we were talking early in the season as they stumbled a little out of the gate. Were they going to underachieve? What's the problem with Boston University? But the Terriers at the midway point are in the lead.
Yeah, I think that what BU needed was just some time to get their skates under their feet. They needed to learn systems. They're young. They needed to play, put some people in place that knew where they were playing, whether it was on the power play, special teams, or just the forward units, the defense, especially in goaltending. I did read yesterday that I believe Jay Pandolfo has yet another goaltender. It'll be his 4th goaltender for the roster coming in basically a semester early. He was supposed to come in next fall, going to be coming in January. So that could be interesting. That has been probably the Achilles heel for this team is goaltending, but even that improved down the stretch of the first half. So I feel like BU, they're in great position. And they've got the superstar power. It might be young, and it is a young team. And sometimes when you get to an NCAA tournament, youth can kind of hurt you. But I still say that this team is as good as any in the country right now.
The funny thing is, at the Frozen Four last year, we just kept talking about the Big Ten, and how they were going to dominate. And then now we're looking at how it's completely changed. And you've got 4 Eastern schools in the top 4. And how that continues throughout the second half of the year will be really interesting to watch because of you've got star power in BU, you've got a young team, you've got BC, you've got Maine, you got Quinnipiac, you got all those really good teams. And we're not talking about anybody out west. And that's going to be interesting to watch how it develops as the year goes on.
Is this something we may see go in cycles? I mean, Michigan and Minnesota, who were in the Frozen Four last year, Michigan more than Minnesota, but both of them impacted by players turning pro. You're going to see that cycle happen to BU and BC, maybe not till after sophomore year, but some of them are going to go after this year.
Don't we see that all the time, though? I remember being in Columbus at the Frozen Four, and it was all WCHA way back when. So I think you're going to see it. You're going to see different teams on different cycles. That right now it depends how long you keep your players. Do they go into the transfer portal? How do you do in the transfer portal? There's a lot of factors on what cycles you see. And I think that we're seeing, we were all scared. I wouldn't say you guys were all in the Big Ten, and all the other coaches were like, oh my God, the Big Ten is just going to pull so far away. And I don't think you're seeing that anymore. I mean, we spent a whole show talking about the Big Ten in Tampa last year when we could have been at the pool.
I mean, listen, it still is probably a scare of NIL money that Big Ten schools have.
Yes, we haven't even brought that in yet.
That I think was what scared most people. It wasn't the fact that the Big Ten. Well, maybe it was. They scored 48 goals in the first round of the NCAA tournament last year, but. I think that it's just you saw some dominance out of the league as we closed out last season. And then there was a lot of concern about where the money was going to come from. And do schools have the ability to find some NIL money that aren't in big Power 5 conferences? So you're taking out, Boston College, Notre Dame, and the Big Tens. That you kind of throw UConn into that, but they're not even a Power 5 conference technically. So I think that there was a fear among smaller schools, but I'm not sure that we've seen the effects of it yet. So maybe there might be some sort of an NIL power struggle that happens, but it can't happen overnight. I guess that's kind of the selling point that I'm trying to make here, is that it's not going to just happen one day. Oh, all the Big Ten schools are giving so much money, so everybody's going to decommit everywhere they've already committed to and go to Big Ten. It happens, yes, but for the most part, we're actually seeing it go the other way. We're seeing kids decommit from some Big Ten schools, and they're heading to some of the schools out east.
Because they got NIL money too. So don't think it's just the Big Ten. Everybody thought it was just going to be the Big Ten with that Allsted money, or the Alston, or however you. I don't even know what we're so far away from it. I don't even know how to pronounce it. But I think you're seeing. You're right. I should have threw that in there. The effects of the NIL money is really gonna move forward, and where they go and where kids go. The big thing to watch when NIL money is coming. What's going to happen with major junior? That's going to really throw a whole big wrench into the world that we know. If major juniors opened up, because I don't know how it can continue to stay closed when people are making more money than a major junior kid makes in a year with NIL money. That's a whole nother topic that we could probably do a whole show on.
Well, speaking of NIL, it really sunk into me when I was in the car a couple of weeks ago and punched on station, and they were carrying Syracuse University basketball, ACC team. And it didn't occur to me till the commercial was over. It was one of the players on the team for a local car dealership doing a commercial. And so maybe there's not big money, but that kind of segues into North Dakota. You think some Fighting Hawks players could be doing local car dealer commercials and things like that. That's some small market NIL there. But all the NIL discussion aside, and certainly we can pick that up on another day, North Dakota is the top NCHC team, fifth. They did have a little stumble with the 2 overtime losses to Colorado College. But Jim, we had Brad Berry on as a guest on our Spotlight podcast. One of the things that's been remarkable there is what he's been able to do to build some cohesiveness with 4 rookies and 4 transfers on his defensive core.
You know, I think that, yeah, the hiccup against Colorado College, might sting a little bit, but I think that North Dakota is fine, for one thing. Just like we were talking about BU when they fell to UNH to open the season and had some struggles early on. But listen, I'm not worried about North Dakota either. They're a really good team. And, will there be some problems when you're breaking in 4 freshman D if they're playing night in, night out? Yeah, sure, there can be. And, you've got just the everything past the forward position is just inexperience within that program. But you still have some really good experienced players playing up in Grand Forks. So I think that, fairly, I do believe that, them and probably Denver are the 2 best NCHC teams right now. They happen to hold the top spot among the NCHC and the PairWise, and that's what we're really talking about here. But I think that North Dakota, they're back, and they're a much better team than they were the last 2 seasons. And credit to Brad Berry for building that back.
Yeah, I mean, they've got Fairbanks coming up after the break, and they've got an exhibition game against the U18 team, but I think the big weekend, and you mentioned it, is circled on their schedule, is Denver.
Yeah.
They play Denver January 26th and 27th. That's going to be the battle of the heavyweights, the 2 favorites in the league. But it's not going to be easy. And we're going to start now, once we get through these Christmas holidays. By the time we do our next show in January, teams are running out of non-conference games. Teams are running out of opportunities. And then they're going to start beating each other up and taken from each other. And that's where we're going to see a lot of changes. So I think once we head right into our ending our non-conference games, then we become a league based and people trying to take each other's pairwise points, basically.
Are we going to see the NCHC with a clear delineation between the top 4 and the bottom 4? And I think right now I might throw Western Michigan and St. Cloud in the top 4. And Minnesota Duluth's had a tough season. Omaha has been chugging along, but not quite in that mix. And then you've got CC and Miami doing better, but still not up in that top half. Is it going to be a clear delineation, or are we going to see a battle for 4 or 5 in that league?
I think you might see delineation, but you're going to see a lot of spoilers from the bottom half of that. Those 4 teams that you just mentioned, CC already did it, taking 2 on the road in overtime at North Dakota. You're going to see a lot of that. That is just, I think that's kind of what the NCHC is. It's what a lot of the conferences are right now. You don't see a lot of sweeps anymore. It's getting harder to sweep outside of the ECAC. In the ECAC, we don't see it. If your name's not Quinnipiac, you're not sweeping a lot of weekends. That's just, it's reality. It's hard to go out there and play Friday, Saturday night, especially when it's the same opponent, and to expect to have the same result. You have to work. Derek, I'm sure you're going to validate this here. If you win Friday, you have to work extra hard to win Saturday because you have a hungrier opponent. That's just reality. So teams that do that, those will be the teams that rise to the top. But I think that you'll see a lot of spoiler play from those bottom 4 teams you mentioned in the NCHC.
Yeah, we every week we talk about how hard it is to win, and the margin of error is razor thin, and you can't get swept. And you see what a big, especially with 6-point weekends, how much you can climb or fall if you do get swept. And I've been on both sides of it right now in the last 2 weekends, and it is hard. It's hard to finish a sweep off, and it's hard to get swept because, like I said, there's just so many little things that happen in the games that you can't predict, you can't dictate, and like I said, it's the margin between winning and losing in college hockey is so small. And Arizona State, I know we're going to talk about them, was here this weekend. I mean, we had a 2-0 lead with 8 seconds to go in the first period last night. And next thing you know, the game completely changed. You get on a couple power plays, you get a little bit of a roll, and you get some momentum, and you put teams back on their heels, and games change, and it's hard to win. I mean, that's what it comes down to right now.
When we turn to the Big Ten, we might have thought that a team starting with M would have been in this position, like Minnesota and maybe Michigan, but Wisconsin and Michigan State are the top 2 teams in the Big Ten. We might have expected the Spartans to be up there with the trajectory they've been on, but it has been a rocket to the top 10 for Wisconsin.
Yeah, probably the best story of the first half. I mean, Wisconsin has just surprised a lot of people. Mike Hastings has done a fantastic job in year 1 up in Madison. And so that is probably the biggest surprise. Michigan State, probably not a surprise. Maybe it is because I still think, despite the fact that you had Adam Nightingale and had a really good recruiting year, and you had some experienced players coming back, I think he still had to sit there and say, go ahead and prove it. You hadn't seen Michigan State prove anything really in the last few years. Now they are doing it, and they're right there. I look at right now being 4th and being 10th in the pairwise is almost interchangeable at this point in the season. So to talk about Michigan State behind Wisconsin 6 and 7, it's not much of a difference.
The funny thing, Ed, is I was going to jump on Jimmy there when you said you were surprised that it's not a team with an M. I'm like, I thought Michigan State still started with an M, and they're right there. I mean, it's I didn't know that we had lost our geography lesson, because you've got 2 teams that are I would say surprised by being the top 2 pairwise ranked teams from the Big Ten. You would have thought it was Minnesota and Michigan, and even potentially at times you look at Ohio State being up high, but the job that both those coaches have done to turn those programs around really quick is extraordinary, especially with the depths of where Wisconsin has been and the depths of where Michigan State had been previously. And you still got a Notre Dame that's still kind of floating around in there. And, Penn State, they got a winning record at 9-7, but they're 2-5. I mean, they're right on the edge there to where they can a couple good weekends. And I'm really shocked. I guess I know we're going to do surprises and things like that, but I'm surprised that Ohio State hasn't won a regulation conference win in the Big Ten, because I think that's a a very good hockey team that will play spoiler if we're talking about spoilers in the second half.
Well, as we look elsewhere around college hockey, we mentioned Quinnipiac in the top 4. The next highest one in the ECAC is Cornell at 21st, but Arizona State at number 16, they moved up a little bit over the weekend. They're the top independent. RIT is the top Atlantic hockey team at 17, and Minnesota State in a tie for 25th in the PairWise is the top team in the CCHA. It's really looking like maybe one of the 3 leagues and maybe an independent might get in. We're going to talk about whether an independent will get in our second half here, but we may be looking at one team in each of those leagues. Maybe one can squeak one more in. My guess is maybe Cornell climbs a little bit and could get in, or wins and Quinnipiac gets in. But among those, it's looking like it's going to be a tight race to see who gets in, and it may just be the automatic qualifiers in ECAC and AHA.
And you can say the same thing CCHA as well. I think the ECAC, Quinnipiac will get in for sure, but they might be the AQ too if they win the tournament.
That's what I meant to say, CCHA.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's okay. So you're looking at, Arizona State is the top independent, and it's kind of not close. Like, I guess Alaska is still there. Alaska Fairbanks, that is, they're right there, kind of just below that line. But these are all teams that have some work to do. I still look at Atlantic hockey, and I feel like if RIT can have a successful second half in their league, they've played some really good non-conference games. They had the big one right out of the break against Maine up at the Ledger Bank tournament. Those 2 games at Ledger Bank are probably pretty big, but now it's going and taking care of business. They've done a great job and won some fantastic non-conference games in the first half, but RIT, they can be the team that sets the pace in the Atlantic hockey, maybe gets up to 10th in the pairwise, and then the pressure's off to win the tournament. I mean, I think that when you're in a conference where you only get the one bid, and I might have said this last week, if you only get that one bid and you have to win your conference tournament, it just puts so much more pressure, especially on those single elimination semifinals and finals in most of the leagues.
Yeah, I don't know. As much as I think that Atlantic hockey is doing a much better job, and I'm obviously a mark for the league, I think we're going in the right direction. I think it's going to be really hard for RIT because they can't slip at all. I mean, they can't. I mean, you can't slip against teams that are in the bottom 10 of the pairwise, and a couple of their games will. And Ed, you watch it all the time. Atlantic hockey's hard. It's a hard old league that anybody can beat anybody on a given night, and just like it is everywhere in college hockey. But if one of those one slip up to a team that's in the bottom 10 of the pairwise, and then next thing you know, you're looking at a team that falls dramatically.
Yeah, for RIT, they're going to need to keep up the pace in the second half for sure. Last year, they kind of came down to earth a little bit come mid-January and into February. So it is tough, though. And it's going to be tough for the CCHA and the ECAC once they get into league play for the reasons you said. Well, we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll come back and look at what some of the biggest stories, biggest disappointments, and some of the things we're looking forward to in the second half of the season are. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th, 2024 in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Where are my hockey fans at? Present! Welcome to Fandom 101. It's NCAA Ice Hockey Championship time, when the hottest teams in the country face off under one roof. Be there to see your squad hoist the ultimate trophy overhead. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th in St. Paul, Minnesota. Attendance is encouraged. Passion is mandatory. Buy your seats today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
Welcome back to USCHO Weekend Review. We're going to go a little roundtable here on some big stories and big disappointments and so forth. Derek, you get to go first on the first question. What is the best story of the first half of the season?
I think we've kind of alluded on it a little bit already. And I know that it's in Jimmy's show notes, but it's really easy. Hockey East, 5 teams in the top 10. I'll even take it one step further, 6 teams in the top 12 of the pairwise. And I think that's a massive story. Within that, you've got some powerhouses. You've got 3 teams in the top 4. You got BU, Maine, BC, and then you go down the list of all these other teams and New Hampshire. So I would say that's mine right now. 6 teams in the top 12 of the pairwise from the Hockey East.
Well, I had a couple of them lined up, and so one of them can get left to Jim if he doesn't have one that's different. You got to look at Wisconsin and the turnaround there, and not just what Mike Hastings' club has done on the ice and how they performed in the Big Ten and getting to number 6 right now in the pairwise, but what it's done for the fan base and the feeling around the Badgers. They're not selling out the Kohl Center, but they're packing it and having an atmosphere. It was really a couple of down seasons for Badger fans. And for that turnaround to happen maybe a year or 2 or 3 ahead of schedule that a lot of people suspected has got to be the great story. And, Mike Hastings, one of the great coaches and great guys around college hockey. So it's a real feel-good story in Madison.
You know what, Ed? You actually left me both of. I had 2 lined up, and they're both left here. So I'll mention them both. The first one, listen, the best night of the college hockey season was when Robert Morris came back, and it feels a little self-serving looking at schools on this podcast, and but that's a good story for college hockey to pull your program out of the ashes and come back. Obviously we saw it in Anchorage as well last season, but it's just that to me was the most touching story. And then you also look at, like, we don't talk a lot of women's hockey, but to see like a school like Delaware adding hockey, that this is good stuff for the game. We need to grow the game, not contract the game. The other thing I had, the second one, in case somebody had already said that, I just think the attendance around college hockey this first half was fantastic. I have been in more sold out buildings this first half of the college hockey season. I think that's just a great story in itself.
And I want to throw in an honorable mention also, which was on my list, which is the Maine Black Bears. Ben Barr is on track, his 3rd year, kind of a 3-year path to getting Maine back into the mix. We talked about them being in the top 4 in the pairwise, number 8 in the poll. They look terrific, and that's another place. Apparently close to sold out for the rest of the games in Orono. They sold out in Portland for the non-conference game against Bentley a couple of weeks ago. Good stuff happening up there, and that's kind of an honorable mention in there too. Well, the next question, and Jim has delegated me to, or designated me, whatever, to go first. What's the biggest disappointment of the first half? Well, I hate to pick on a team, but at this time last year, we were amazed to see Merrimack at number 6 in the pairwise. And their performance, 5 points in Hockey East, kind of some losses, although a couple of non-conference wins at Thanksgiving time in the turkey leg. We kind of expected the Warriors to kind of pick up a bit from where they were last year. Maybe not at those high heights, but it's got to be disappointing for a team that was the runner-up in the Hockey East playoffs and made the NCAAs to get off to a disappointing first half.
Yeah, especially with the number of players they returned from last year. I guess I go second here, but I don't like to pick on a league. But I got to pick on the CCHA, and Don Lucia is a great commissioner. He does a fantastic job. But man, those programs just they're not showing out right now. I know you lose Mike Hastings as a coach, and he lost a lot of players there. And I think that everything at Minnesota State, they're still the best team pairwise in the conference, but you can't have just one team have to carry the water every year. In Minnesota State, their success across the board picked up a lot of programs because you were playing them, and maybe you get an overtime loss, or you get a random win, and that would really boost your pairwise. And they were getting their 3 teams in the NCAA tournament pretty consistently. And I'm kind of just concerned about what has happened in the CCHA. Maybe it bounces back in the second half when the play is a little bit more inside the conference, and maybe 2 or 3 teams really emerge, go lights out second half, and those teams at the bottom really fall. But right now it's a lot of mediocrity. Again, great commissioner Don Lucia. Some great teams, great traditional teams in that conference, but you got to look yourself in the mirror sometimes and say it's time to pick it up.
You kind of took a little bit of mine. I was going to go with that there could only be 3 conferences with 1 team in the tournament if it was right now. So you kind of took a portion of it, and I don't know if that's great for our game. I think that might be a little. There's becoming, as much as we talk about how hard it is to win, there's becoming a little bit of separation. And I don't think that's great. I think there's a lot of really good teams and a lot of really good conferences. But I mean, at the end of the day, college hockey, we are looking, and I know one of our questions later is, will there be a first-time champion? Where's the unions of the world that are going to win that national championship? Is it always going to be the same? So the 3 conferences that would only get 1 team in right now is kind of my disappointment.
What do we look forward to most in the second half of the season? Jimmy, you go first on this one.
Oh, I had a bunch lined up for this one. I want to see where some of these programs that haven't been there in a while go. Like UNH kind of stands out to me. Will they continue to be as dominant as they were in that first half? Can they continue to climb? I mean, there's some programs, Maine's another one. These are programs that, at least when I'm growing up out here in Hockey East World, these were the dominant programs. You saw UNH and Maine in the national championship game in Anaheim in '99. You saw them play in the Garden for the for the Hockey East Championship a number of times. I mean, these are 2 great programs, and there's a few of those around. Wisconsin's another one. Will they get to stay around? They're not that far off from having some dominant years. I go back to obviously Cole Caulfield when that was a pretty good Wisconsin team, but I'm Michigan State's another one. I want to see if these programs that used to be up there and now are kind of showing that they're getting back, can they sustain? That's what I look forward to watching in the second half.
I'm looking forward to Christmas break. You wanted to know what I'm looking forward to in the college hockey season? Okay. Once again, Christmas break, but. So I'm looking forward to, like getting to the point where we continue to grow the game. I just talked about growing the game in the last segment, getting the new teams. And I appreciate you bringing us into the mix of a big story, Jimmy, but the next Augustana, where is that? Getting those new teams. And I think that you might hear some. I think you might hear some more rumblings, and I'm looking forward to going down to Florida, not because of that, and hearing about all the new teams that could be on the rise. There's a lot of big stories that could happen, from NIL to new teams to major, junior. I mean, there's a lot to look forward to in college hockey of in the second half.
I'm looking forward to what I hope is a continued trend of more scoring in college hockey. Jim and I talked about this in TMQ last Monday.
Score. I can't score. We can't score, and they're going to throw that in my face.
Well, I'm hoping for you to join into it. So we're way above the pace of last season with combined games of 10 goals or more. The average going into this past weekend was 5.92 goals a game. That's up a half a goal a game from 10 years ago, and better than 0.3 of a goal per game over the 10-year average. So scoring is up. And I looked up those numbers because we had a sense that it was up. And it makes me scratch my head a little bit, because goaltending has also gotten so good, but skills have gotten good. And people, every time you have an innovation, people find ways to get around it. People have found ways to sneak pucks up over the shoulder and pass the ear of the goaltenders and things like that. And that's another thing to work on. Maybe that'll be the the counter to the scoring, doing some different goaltending techniques or whatever. But I love the increased scoring. You know, I'm a hockey fan. I like a 1-0 or a 2-1 game, but a 7-6 game is a lot of fun too.
Ed likes goals.
Yeah. You know, bring back the Black Bears of 30 years ago, right? Well, how about some questions to consider heading into the second half of the season? Just kind of a lightning round here. First of all, Hockey East with 5 teams in the top 10. Didn't they have 6 last year at this time? Something like that. Can Hockey East sustain that dominance going into the end of the season?
I'm going to answer yes here, and the reason is I think they had 6 around Thanksgiving last year, and that's when you've played about 50% of the non-conference games. Right now, I did the math before we got on. They've played 68% of all of their non-conference games. So that's a pretty good sign that you have 6 in the top 12 right now of the pairwise. Let's also, be realistic. There's a chance that there could be cannibalization within the league. If some teams like Vermont, who's been playing well of late, Merrimack, you mentioned them, Ed, if Lowell gets healthy, Northeastern, if they're footing, could those teams suddenly start beating some of those top teams and knocking them down a few pegs? That was what happened a lot last year. And in addition to almost all of Hockey East having a slump right out of the Thanksgiving and Christmas breaks, they also really cannibalize one another. That's the only reason I say that you might have some issues with it. But no, I think right now what we're seeing in that league is what you get. If 2 teams might fall here, it might be UNH and Providence, but they're both pretty good teams right now.
I'm going to pull like I'm the color guy in major leagues where Bob Bucher goes, "What do you think?" And the guy goes, "Yeah." Jimmy just said it. He actually took the words right out of my mouth when I said that the biggest thing will be to watch New Hampshire. Will they be able to sustain what they're doing?
Well, Derek, I'll let you go first on the next one. Will the CCHA get only 1 team into the NCAA tournament?
I'll use my same quote. Yeah. I don't know where it comes from. The only way it does is if, you can't climb from 25th all the way up. So I think it's just going to be the league champion. I mean, I think they're too far below. I don't think there's enough non-conference games left, and they're just going to keep beating each other. So yeah, they can't. They will only get 1.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm having a hard time seeing a way, finding the path. You hear sports radio all the time talks about what's the path to the playoffs. Well, what's the path for 2 of the teams to get out of the bottom half of the pairwise right now? And Minnesota State, obviously, they've gotten closer. They've inched closer, and they're probably the team you look at as probably the favorite to win that conference. I think that does, maybe make that tournament even more exciting. That's been a pretty exciting tournament over the last couple of years. But it makes it even more exciting knowing that there's just nothing but pressure. Every team has to feel that same pressure. So when you're talking about the single elimination part of that tournament, it will be crazy.
And when you look at where teams stand right now with strength of schedule because of the non-conference record in that league and ECAC and Atlantic Hockey, you got to run away with the league. And we already talked about how hard it is to sweep a weekend. You'd have to put together a whole bunch of 6-5, 4-point weekends to really get up there. So it's going to be tough. And while we're on the topic, will an independent team qualify for the NCAA field? Last year, as I wrote, Alaska missed by a fraction of a whisker and just were beat out by Merrimack getting into it. Will an independent team make it in?
It's going to be challenging. And I had this conversation with Greg Powers last night. He thinks they need to get to 26 wins, which is an awful lot of wins. I know that, and I brought up the fact that you two were on the 2-team bandwagon earlier in the year, and I thought it was going to be hard for 1 team. And he made a really good point. They got to play each other 4 times, Fairbanks and Arizona State. So I don't think that there's two teams, and he says 26 wins. He's got to go 13-5. He's got 18 games left. He's at 13 wins right now. I think that's going to be awful hard. The margin of error, they could literally not lose to us this past weekend because it would have ended their season basically. And then they're playing out the string. It's hard as an independent to get into that tournament. So I would say 13-5 is going to be challenging for Arizona State. So I think they're going to be close, but I don't think an independent team will get in. And I told Greg that last night.
I'm going to say yes. I still think that Arizona State is a team. They have a tougher little slate here. Their next 6 games might decide the yes or no of that. Talking about playing Clarkson out in Lake Placid, and then either UMass or Cornell in the championship across the Harvard in their own tournament, and then either Omaha or UMass Lowell in either consolation or championship game. Then at home against Cornell. But then after that, you're talking about 2 long trips. They have to go to Alaska twice and have to sandwich in a weekend against LIU in between that. But, the final, doing my math here, 12 games of their schedule, if they can't go 11-1 in that stretch, I'm kind of surprised. They have a schedule that sets them up pretty well. Obviously, Fairbanks will be the biggest challenge in making sure that you don't blow it on games that you're supposed to win. You don't drop one to Lindenwood. You don't drop one to LIU at home. You don't drop one to Augustana at home. You don't lose to Anchorage on the last 2 games up there when you need to get those final wins. But I like his number. I like his projection. 26 gets them in. I think 25, and they're close.
Well, you know what? And
might not have to get all of them, but most of them.
But it's so hard. You're talking about kids that you're going to throw a stinker in. That there's going to be that one game that a goalie stands on his head. And the pressure for an independent, like you talk going up to Anchorage, the long travel, are they going to be able to get both games? Those are the things. Let's not forget that they had to go to overtime to beat Stonehill too. I mean, there's the pressure every game they have to win. And you're right. You're going to see it in their next couple games. So I still say no.
Jim, you mentioned that tough row of games they've got coming up. If they can go 3-3 against those teams, they're in a pretty good position when they get into the rest of their schedule.
You would think. As Derek just said, listen, these kids could throw in a stinker, and that's your concern. I just went back and looked at the last time they qualified for the NCAA tournament. Not the 2020 season that the tournament got canceled, but the year before that, they had a much more difficult row of opponents in the second half. They beat Boston College twice. They got swept by Cornell. They split with BU. They swept RIT. They swept AIC, and then they got swept by Minnesota. Still made it to the NCAA tournament and dropped a game against Quinnipiac after a 28-day break. So they've been in this position before, but they had more opponents that could boost their RPI. They don't have as many of those opponents, especially after the next 6 games.
Let's go to the next one. Is there a team, and I'm going to throw some info in on this, is there a team currently 20th or below in the PairWise that will qualify in an at-large position for the NCAA tournament? Last year around this time, Western Michigan was something like number 23 and made it into the tournament. So we've got recent history that says yes, but what about this season?
I say Cornell. That's my pick. They're 21st right now. I know I'm not going that much below that 20 line, but I say Cornell. They'll get in.
I didn't know we're picking a team. I thought it was just a yes or no answer. So
you can say yes or no, Schools. That's okay.
That's where I am at today. I'm a yes or no guy. No, I don't think there is. I think they might. Maybe you're looking at 19 or 20. I think they're Penn State or Notre Dame could end up pulling in at one of those 2 teams. I'm more shocked, and we haven't brought it up, by Michigan, because if the tournament was today, they would not make the tournament, because they're like. And another thing that when Greg and I were talking, because obviously we think 12 or 13 might be the number to get in. So I say no, maybe 19 or 20, Penn State, Notre Dame. But Michigan right now, if the tournament was today, would not be in the tournament.
Last question. Will we have a first-time national champion? If I can answer first, I'm going to say we're going to have a Frozen Four with 4 teams who have national championships in their past. So no.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there, Ed. I looked at, the top 10 in the current pairwise are all former national champions. It was nice to see Quinnipiac last year break that streak of, and become a first-time national champion. But you're talking in the top 16 right now, there's only 4 teams that have a chance to qualify. That UNH, they're 11th, Western Michigan, they're 12th, St. Cloud is 14th, and Arizona State is 16th. Those are your top 16 teams in the current pairwise. So I say probably not.
Yeah, I would agree. I was actually, while you were talking there and you had the statistical analysis, I was looking. I don't. It's blue bloods. It's not going to happen. I mean, it's easy as that.
We talk about it being good for the sport to have new teams win championships. Can you also make the argument that getting the blue bloods back in there is good for it? Is it good for college hockey on the East Coast if BU and BC are in there? Is it good for the Midwest to have like North Dakota and Wisconsin, or to have Michigan State back in it?
Yes, but I don't think we talk about growing the game. It only makes the big time schools want to start, another Big Ten team or that. Why would obviously you have that ability to get to the tournament. You have the ability to do that and get recognition for your school and have a great program and all that. But the days, I think, like I said, of union are hard to win a national championship. I mean, the easiest, and you talked about women's hockey earlier. That's the road right now for the little known schools. But then you still have the big dogs that run the show on that as well. So is it good? Yes and no. It's good that the publicity of those big schools are back, but it's hard for the little engine that could, like the Union, to win a national championship. The Yales of the world again.
Even Quinnipiac, he can throw into that category. Despite the fact that they had been to the title game twice, to see them get over the hump was a good story for college hockey. And that did a lot to grow it. I don't mind what Ed's point was, though, to get some of these teams back that have been gone for so long, to get Maine, to get Wisconsin, to get Michigan State into a Frozen Four, into a national title game, to have a Maine Wisconsin final, or a Michigan State Boston College rematch of St. Louis. I'd love to see it.
Well, with that, we'll wrap up this edition of USCHO Weekend Review. Some final thoughts as we head into the holiday break, guys.
Merry Christmas. I talked about break. We're at break. Now we're at break with you too.
We're at true break now. The 10 games that were played over the weekend. There was one of the lowest in this weekend that we've had in some time. But now we're really at a break. No games this weekend. We'll see everybody back. I think it's December 27th is the next game. And go USA in the World Juniors. Want to see this U.S. team do really well. Best of luck to David Carl, his staff, and that team over in Sweden.
Well, we'll let Jimmy go batten down the hatches as he's in the midst of a storm, as you could hear a little bit on that last little comment. For Derek Schooley, for Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th, 2024 at Xcel Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. We'll see you next time in the year 2024 on USCHO Weekend Review.